Hello, everybody, and welcome to the IC Topic Chats today, September 15th, 2022. We are revisiting the core session with a core topic on subcontractors and employees, hiring them. This is a session that we've done several times. We do it it seems like we do it every September. Last year, we did it with Jessica Sickler, and I do want to point that out because she contributed to these slides and to the thoughts around these ideas. And so some of what she had to say a year ago are things that are still present in the slides today. I have seen a lot of change in my consulting practice since I started giving this session 2 years ago in September 2020. I had one employee, and literally it was 2 years ago today that I hired my second, well, I guess technically my third. I'm the first employee because I was hired and I am both an owner and an employee, but then I hired my colleague Tom Withy, and then 2 years ago today my third employee came on, and today, now 2 years later, we have 9 full-time employees and 2 grad assistants, and I think about 5 to 10 subcontractors, depending on what's going on. They seem like we're always got something going on with subcontractors. So I had a little bit of experience with this. The slides haven't changed, which is an interesting thing because I think some of the thoughts are the same. I have a lot more experience and a lot more things that I can share. And as we heard from Sam Robeson earlier, if I don't know what I'm talking about, we'll just ask him to take over, and he'll just give the presentation, right, Sam? He's shaking his head. Sorry about that. All right, let me get my slides up here on my computer. All right, so I want to talk about 5 different areas of types of support. Typically, you probably came to the session thinking full-time employee and perhaps subcontract. I want to throw a couple other ideas out at you. Somebody who might want to work for you as an intern or pro bono. I want you to consider graduate assistants and part-time employees, in addition to subcontracts and full-time employees. And I heard in our introductions earlier, before we started this recording, that one of our individuals on the session today is thinking about taking a full-time position with another firm, and that's something that I've had experience with as well. And another thing that's interesting is that I have 2 employees who are physically located in other parts of the country now too, and I know that that's an interesting situation. I'd be happy to share a little bit about information about that as well. So let's jump in and talk about interns or student practicums. So an intern is somebody or a student practicum who hypothetically could be working for you for free, or I suggest you consider paying your interns or your practicum students because I think you get a better work product, and it's also a more ethical thing to do for people who come to work for you. It is meant to be a learning experience for those individuals. You need to have a commitment to their individual development. So this is over and above what they may come to do for you. Hypothetically, it's a low cost. I had a student practicum this summer who was a grad student who was actually one of our graduate assistants who wanted to take on a different project with us. And I paid him over the summer for, I don't know how many hours of work, $3,000, which isn't necessarily an insignificant amount, but relative to the amount of hours he worked, it was, I think not too terribly expensive. It's a way that you can give back to the field. I believe AEA has different types of opportunities that they advertise around this idea. Be aware that the cons on this is that their contribution may or may not be valuable. I mean, because you're committed to their individual development, you may find that they're doing a lot of work, but kind of they end up spinning their wheels, and that you may find that the value that they add it's probably going to be inconsistent. I guess we have a note from before that unpaid internships are illegal. I'm not sure I understand why that's the case, but I think that I always pay for my internships anyway. I think that was something that Jessica added to the notes a year ago, and she's got some some links in here. If anybody wants to see it, I'll share that in the chat after the session. Getting into the next slide, graduate assistants. So I've had graduate assistants. I think you're going to find a lot of similarities to internships here. Graduate assistants are people you might contract with the university to work with you. Again, you're going to find that there's inconsistency with graduate assistants. They do need a lot of direction. So that's the con that you'll see there. There's some beautiful pieces to the pros end of this. You don't pay taxes for them. You basically coordinate a relationship with the university, and more likely with a faculty member within a university department. I suggest, at least my experience has been, industrial organizational psychology has a lot of interest in the kind of work that we do. I think sociology, any of your social sciences are typically going to be areas that are good. My other experience has been that if you're working with university students, look for that academic department that's just kind of ranked really high, that has really strong students. They're typically going to be, that department's going to be more selective. And so students out of those departments could be very good employees. As Ann Price wrote, evaluation is a core and community psych program. So yeah, I know that in my community in St. Louis, Washington University of St. Louis has social work programs. I've never had any graduate assistance through the social work master's degree, but that's one of the top ranked programs in the country. And so those are students that have evaluation as one of the courses that they take on. And so that would probably be a good way for me to go if I decided to go that way. But again, remember, that's raw talent. You are going to need to work with these students to really understand what they're doing. Typically, they're not coming in with a lot of experience. And even in today's world, a lot of our students are coming in with many of which who don't even have any work experience at all. Like, they don't know what it's like to work for a person or an organization. So they have to learn little things like showing up on time and how to write appropriate emails. So you may find that even at a graduate student level. I think we're seeing that more so than we used to, like when I was a student. Subcontracts. This is probably an area for a lot of interest for you, and I think it's going to be an area for a lot of conversation later. Subcontracting is an opportunity to put somebody on a trial if you're thinking about hiring an employee. Alternately, if you just have no interest in hiring employees, this is a way to work with talented people. You can develop a contract, you can develop a scope of work with an individual. I have some ideas in here. You have focused delivery. You're coming on to work with me on XYZ project. Here's your responsibilities. Here's my responsibilities. Here's what the final product will look like. Here's the amount that I'm going to give to you. And this is, and you set up a contract for how the payment works. And that works out pretty beautifully for a lot of people. It's a temporary financial obligation, so you're able to control your costs. It's going to be different than an employee situation. And I think that it's important for you to make sure you understand what the difference is between a subcontractor and an employee. If you are dictating the times that they'll work and you're providing a lot of direction over that, then you need to make sure that you can pass what they call the legal smell test of contractor versus employee. In the notes I'll put in, and in the chat after we get done with this session, I'll put in a list of the IRS kind of review process, because you need to go through. There's oftentimes a checklist. Many universities will have this when they hire you as a contractor, but you need to make sure that you're not appearing, the people you hire as subcontractors are not appearing as employees, because you may be reviewed for taxes, because the states that you work within, many of them will want the tax money that would come along with an employee. And if you're trying to, it might look like you're skirting the taxes. So you need to make sure that that relationship is very clearly laid out. Usually, and the way I do it with my contracts as a contractor to a university, I have those things listed in my contract, so you may want to think about incorporating that language into your contract as well. On the cons end of having subcontracts, that individual is there for a purpose, and that is to get paid to do a specific thing for a project. Now, you may be able to develop relationships with these individuals that last a long time, and I think we have lots of good stories about that. Anne will probably share some of those in the chat. But you know, they're there for the purpose of being a part of their own firm or their own practice, and not necessarily are part of your practice. And so there needs to be a subdivision there, but also there is one. And so you don't have all that kind of extra time that comes along with a person being an employee and part of your firm. You probably will want to think that the cost on this will be more on an hourly basis than if you were to hire a person. And you may still have tax withholding obligations. You may need to look into that in your state. All right, let's see what else we got. Again, I think we're going to probably spend some time talking about this in chat. Oh, I know that Anne wrote something to me, and I think we heard that subcontractors may report up, and I think that's generally an employee thing. I have that set up with my staff, and this is the way we operate. Whether it's a subcontract or if it's an employee, one of the things that's nice is I've kind of passed my work, the day-to-day work, on to my staff, and they're leading the work at this point, which I think has been a delicate dance with the clients, which I think has worked out really well. But I think one of our, I forget who it was, but someone was saying how it's been nice. Maybe it was, I forget who it was, but that my staff tell me what they need from me so that we can support our clients versus me telling them how to do it. And maybe within the subcontract perspective, that may be the same thing that is going on as well, that your subcontractors can lead the way and support the projects. All right, let's talk about part-time and seasonal. So this is probably not something we're necessarily thinking about, but this is a form of like an employee. And this is how I started off with some of my folks who come in over the summer. Because I do educational research, I often have teachers and university faculty who may be interested in working with me, and they have more time during the summer. And turns out that's actually a busy time for us. It's nice to have them involved. So my colleague Tom, he came to work for me in the summers initially, and then we offered him a position, and the firm's grown ever since. But anyhow, you might want to think about who is available when you're really, really busy, and is that somebody you can bring in? Is it somebody who you might have thought of as a subcontractor, but somebody who's just really only available for a couple months out of the year? Or part-time, we have, if you need an office manager, and that's what we have. Our office manager is full-time, but at first our office manager was part-time, and they worked 20 hours a week. It's kind of set up for a person who wanted their mornings and their afternoons off, and they would come in for 4 hours in the middle of the day and support all the things that were going on within the firm. You might see that you can find somebody who's retired, who has a lot of skills. They can also be focused on delivery, and they will have a commitment to the firm because they are hired in as a firm employee. On the con, they may not have the commitment to the firm because they're only there for such a short amount of time, and also you'll be paying employee taxes. So I put this slide up to give you kind of a perspective on full-time employees and how long people have been involved with their firms from the survey that we did in 2015. So it's getting a couple years old now. It's about 7 years old, but overwhelmingly, people do not have more than one employee. But you see it grows over time. People in the 15 to 19 years are most likely to have them, but only about a quarter of the firms that individuals who own firms or own independent consulting practices have 2 or more employees. So overwhelmingly, we have one person operations within the independent consulting TIG. But this is just to give you a sense, as years go on, find it more prominent in those years. And then I think what happens, and Anne will probably give some perspective on this, you get to a point where you've been doing this for a hot minute, and you realize you don't want employees anymore because they're more headache than not. But I think there's reasons to think they make sense as well. For me, I have, like I said, I have 9 full-time employees. And the reason I like the idea of having an employee is because they are committed to the firm. And you'll see these in the pros here. I can give them room to grow and develop because I have 9 people who are committed to the firm, including myself. We have a team ethic. And I think you can definitely develop this among subcontractors, and everybody's gonna have their own situation. But when you're paid and your email says Goshen Education Consulting, you know, you are part of a group that's supportive. And so kind of get those intangible internal connections that occur. And I try and encourage those. From my perspective, it also gives me the ability to pass things on. So I'm moving into more of a firm director role and less than the day-to-day program evaluator role. In fact, I do very little day-to-day program evaluation right now. And that seems to be working out pretty well. We have it set up now where we have 3 teams of 2. And so we have 3 team leads, and they have their series of projects. And then they each have a junior staff member who supports them. And so that's 6 of our full-time employees. And then I'm 7. Then we have an office manager. We have a project director specific to a very large grant. And then we have 2 graduate assistants. And so the graduate assistants primarily serve the large grant, but they also provide support for everybody for whatever needs to be done. I like the team work set up right now, and I think the firm could grow, and I'm growing around this idea of employees, though I can see the drawbacks. There's a lot of people who say, why would you ever want to hire a person? Because that's going to be a drain on resources to the organization. If you've got enough work, then it actually supports profitability, because you're going to pay less for an employee than you will for a subcontractor to do that amount of work. But you have to have enough. You have to have enough work to do that. We have probably right now 38 projects. So to do that, it's nice to have a staff of people that can kind of support all the work that's going on. Just to make sure we cover those cons. When you hire a person, you're committed to their career, right? And I am committed to the career of the people who are hired in as employees. And so that's not just a minor commitment, that's a pretty major commitment. Whether you're an HR expert or not, you need to think like an HR expert when you hire a person. What does it mean to have benefits? What are those benefits that need to be provided to support someone wanting to work for you? For us, it's a QSARA, Qualified Small Employer Health Reimbursement account so it's health care, right? How do you support healthcare? Everybody should have healthcare in the United States. And so we decided that we would give a certain amount to our employees to figure it out. I'm not sure that's the right choice, but it's the choice that everybody wanted. It is more expensive because you have to pay for taxes and benefits and other expenses, and AEA attendance. As I found out today, I've spent several $1,000s in the last 24 hours just getting people prepared to go to AEA. Now, this was a slide that Jessica put in there, but since over the last year, I've actually hired 2 employees. We do have 2 team members who are in Nebraska and in Tennessee who come to work for us. And so I'm a month and a half into this experiment. I'll tell you a lot more soon, but it seems to be really working out well. And the reason is the pandemic has taught people how to work from home. In fact, a lot of my staff members work from home half the time or most of the time. And these 2 members obviously work from home all the time because they're nowhere near us. It seems to be working out. Zoom is an amazing thing. All the different kinds of networking that you do through for us anyway, I think some people use Slack. We don't use Slack. We use all the Google resources, and that seems to be working out pretty well with the Google chat that happens internally, and sharing of documents, and just the way that works. I think it works out pretty well. So you may actually find yourself in this situation, and that's what I'd love to be able to chat about when we get into the chat in just a second. So a couple 5.5 suggestions for your kind of support. Alan Weiss has this belief that 1 + 1 should equal 64. So that's kind of a general reference to basically saying there's a multiplier effect when you bring more people on. Because I can be amazing, another person can be amazing at what they do, but together we're more than 2 times amazing in this situation, he thinks, if you're bringing somebody else on. It's an interesting thing that I bring Alan Weiss up because he is adamant about not hiring employees for all the reasons that the cons suggested in the previous slide. I believe that my firm is better for it, and it gives me the time to focus on other things. And knowing that my staff, my hired full-time staff who are Goshen Education and Consulting employees, can do the work, and I give them the room to do that, I can focus on firm development and all the administrative operations for the firm. When you're thinking about any kind of support, whether it be a subcontractor, a part-time employee, a full-time employee, make sure that you're finding people who complement. Now, you may want to make sure there's some redundancy in programs, and that if one person leaves, another person can step in. But generally, you want to make sure that the new person comes in is not exactly like somebody else, that they're bringing something new and fresh to the team. I'm always looking for good writers, right? We have very good data people, but so I'm always looking for people who can write. And that would be the compliment that I'm always looking for more of within employees, because we're all very good analysts. Know your budget. So make sure you understand ahead of time what the cost is to bring a person on, because the cost isn't just their salary. It's not just their salary plus their benefits. It's not just their salary plus their benefits plus their taxes. There's a lot of cost in your time in bringing a person on. So if you think for every hour they're spending, how much time is it going to take, particularly in the first month, first 6 months, first year of your support to them? And that's time that you don't have to work on something else, on another project that's billable, that's administrative. So you become overhead to your employees. So make sure you understand and you're figuring these things out. A lot of people will say the old number, and it's just a rule of thumb, but the rule of thumb was, if I want to hire a new employee, it costs me I need $150,000 in revenue. That's a lot of money. I'm not paying a person $150,000. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? But if you're bringing on a person for perhaps $75,000, you can make a case for why it needs to be $150,000, because that's $75,000 salary plus benefits plus taxes plus your time. So that's a rough number, but you need to make up what your number is. I'm not sure it's $150,000 for me in my situation where I am, but that was a number that I've heard people throw around at AA. When you go through this hiring, to hire a person, if you're hiring an individual, you want to thoroughly vet them. Even if you're hiring a subcontractor or anybody, make sure you're thoroughly vetting who that individual is, because you're placing your clients and effectively your name, your firm's name, in the hands of another individual. So you want to make sure you understand how you're doing this. Think through that hiring process that you may have gone through with other things. Generally try and work within your network of people. My experience has been people who work for my firm who recommend an individual. People who work for my firm that are amazing at what they do, who recommend another individual, is going to be a great candidate for a position. If somebody's coming in completely blind and we don't know who they are, you've got to do a lot of background work to make sure that that person is good for your firm, because oftentimes there's a lot of surprises. And I found more of this in my office manager position than I have in my consulting positions. But when you're working through Indeed.com to hire somebody, it's really complicated to find out their whole backstory and what kind of baggage they're bringing with them. So make sure you're using some sort of a hiring process. You're thinking through this. You may even want to consider working with an HR consultant to help you out with this, because there's a lot of mistakes, and very expensive mistakes if you do this wrong. Along with that line, your decision, this is something that goes back to when I was even a doctoral student. I remember we talked about this. Your decision to hire a person is your decision not to fire that person. That's a kind of a complicated way of saying, again, thoroughly vet. If there's any question in your mind, if your little voice is telling you perhaps this is not the right person for you, then you should probably not hire that person. It's better for you to work 60 hours, 80 hours a week and not make a financial mistake, a hiring mistake, than to hire that person and think you've got a great thing. But if there's something nagging in your head about whether this is going to be the right person, it's probably not the right person. And I am noticing now that we are 47 minutes into the hour. So I want to make sure you see the next sessions. Mary Frances Porter is going to be with us next week, talking about post-pandemic marketing strategies. Nina and Kathleen are going to talk about reflective practice. I'm going to do another IC topic, core topic on contracting in 3 weeks. And then we get a panel presentation with Lori Min, Amy, and Mendelin about moving from solopreneur to entrepreneur, which is kind of probably a lot of conversation like we've heard today. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and let's get into the chat portion.